Many people are quite disturbed by what's happening in the US presidential election right now. As I'm recording this, the debate is on tonight between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I didn't watch the first one because he was so threatening I couldn't bring myself to do it. I just turned it off. The second one, he wasn't yelling quite so much, but he was very menacing as he lurked behind Hillary. As we look at this image that's on the screen, the image itself can feel threatening, and it can be helpful to take a step back and freeze frame, go through this in slow motion to see what's really going on in this activation. There's an image that's made of colors and shapes, and our brain makes sense of it, our mind makes sense of it. We all have a survival system that's based on experience, and an image like that of a man coming up behind a woman with that kind of a look on his face feels threatening to us, especially if we're women. So it's not the actual image itself, it's what it represents. And we can be triggered into fear and anxiety by images like that and by words. Some of the words that have been reported as conversations that he's had, listening to those words, hearing them, and listening to people share their experiences of being targeted in that way in the real world, really brings us home that this isn't a one-off thing. It's not an intellectual exercise. It's certainly not locker room talk. This kind of attitude, entitlement and predatory behavior, and this whole environment that's so front and center right now feels very threatening because there's a correlation to what happens in real life. And when we're watching news coverage or the debate, for most of us, we can't help getting stirred up in some way, whether it's we're looking at Trump as being predatory, or some people are looking at Hillary and seeing her as some kind of devil. What all of this comes down to is this is an election, and these two candidates for president have really polarized and are acting as lightning rods for a lot of fear and anxiety in our culture. The truth of the matter is we don't know what the truth is, and we don't really have any way to find out what the truth is. We can look to people who are fact-checking the claims and see what the truth from reputable organizations is that are impartial and don't have a real stake in making us believe one thing or the other. When I work with people, we look a lot around anxiety and notice that there's a draw and a real fear around what's been happening, especially with Donald Trump. And part of the fear is a threat of what would happen if the kinds of policies that he seems to propose would actually become law. And part of it would be what would happen if he was in charge of whether or not we went to war or had a nuclear attack. And part of it is there's a feeling of why is it that so many people are seemingly falling for this, for president of the most powerful country in the world, that they would vote for someone like Donald Trump. So there's a fear there as well of, I don't understand this. How could this be happening? What's going on here? And whenever we feel powerless and like we have no control, it triggers fear. And it seems to me that some people are looking at Donald Trump as being the biggest bully, the most powerful person, and therefore the one that they could kind of tuck themselves under his wing for protection. And there's a willful, unconscious denial around actually he's going to go after them too. But it feels somewhat safer in the moment to believe in that rhetoric of, I'm the one who is going to protect you. This whole election and the discussion around it and the amount of passion that people have and how extensively we're triggered is very revealing about who we are as a society, how damaged we are and traumatized as a culture and as individuals in a culture, and how much we need to heal from that fear. The one thing that's always clear is that fear isolates and it helps other people to manipulate us, that if we weren't so triggered ourselves, nobody would be susceptible to that kind of bullying and fear-mongering. One thing we need to keep in mind is that people can say anything on the internet. And often in the more establishment news media outlets as well, there are a lot of things being said and proclaimed that are not true. So as you're watching the debate tonight and as we're watching the coverage over the next few weeks, it can be helpful to recognize how triggering this is, that a lot of people are being stirred up by the fear-mongering that's going on. It's helpful to acknowledge when we're triggered by something, and as we look at images and whatever the images are that come out of the debate tonight, we can see that those are images that we're watching and energy that we're feeling, and that some of this has to do with the two speakers on stage and the words that are being spoken and the energy that's coming across and the body language and the feeling of threat that has to do with this debate. And one of the reasons it lands so hard is because it also has to do with all of our life experiences to date. And as we sit in our living rooms and watch it on TV or on our devices or computers, try to keep some grounding in your own experience. Notice your body and your breath. Notice the fear or anxiety that might be coming up, or the anger. And notice that in your experience at the time, that those images and words couldn't actually hurt you. Notice what kind of energy is going on in your body, what's being triggered by those. And notice if the energy feels menacing, or if it perhaps feels like a need to be protected, and that's why that strong energy is there. It might be a traumatic memory is being triggered through the experience of watching what's going on in the debates in the political race for president. It's a very complex reaction that we have to what's happening right now. And to give yourself some support. And if it feels like it's the right thing to do, turn away from any compulsive watching that's going on around the debate. I know a lot of people are just completely down the rabbit hole of coverage on this, and in part it's because there's some urgency around, if I could just figure it out, maybe I could feel safer. Take a few deep breaths. See if you can take a step back and notice what it is that's happening here. And support yourself however it is that you need to do that.